Before we begin, pause for a moment. If you're drawn to true crime mysteries, unsolved disappearances, and stories that leave you with more questions than answers, make sure you hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We bring you real cases, haunting retellings, and chilling vanishings that could happen to anyone, anywhere. It was supposed to be an ordinary Saturday, the kind of day where life unfolds without drama. The sun rose over the tree line, casting light across the small town of Hartsfield, a quiet community bordered by dense woods and narrow hiking trails. That morning, 42-year-old Daniel Whitaker clipped a leash onto his German Shepherd, Rex, and headed into the woods. Daniel was known around town as dependable and grounded. He worked as a carpenter, a man who lived simply and preferred the quiet rhythm of rural life. He wasn't reckless. He wasn't the type to wander off without telling anyone. Hiking those trails was a ritual for him, almost sacred. Neighbors remembered seeing him leave, nodding as he passed. A few waved. He smiled, lifted a hand, and disappeared down the path into the trees. Hours later, long after Daniel should have been home, Rex returned. The loyal dog scratched at the Whitakers' front door, barking in a panicked rhythm. His fur was damp with mud. His collar was still intact. But Daniel? He wasn't with him. At first, his family thought maybe he'd stayed out longer than usual. Daniel loved the woods, and sometimes he lingered. But as dusk crept in, worry began to gnaw. By nightfall, fear turned into dread. Daniel was missing. The call to 911 set off a chain reaction that pulled the whole community into the mystery. Within hours, volunteers lined the trails with flashlights. Search dogs scoured the ground. Deputies marked areas with ribbons and tape. Helicopters with infrared sensors scanned the treetops. Nothing. No footprints beyond the initial trail. No broken branches. No torn fabric. No blood. It was as if Daniel had walked into the forest and simply vanished. The dog's return became the most unsettling detail. Search experts explained that in most hiking accidents, falls, injuries, sudden medical emergencies, the dog usually stays. They circle. They bark. They refuse to leave their owner's side. But Rex had come home alone, agitated, almost desperate to get someone's attention. As investigators questioned the family, more strange details began to surface. Daniel had not brought his phone, unusual for him even on hikes. His wallet was still at home. The only thing missing was Daniel himself, along with his dog leash. By the second day, the search had grown massive. Dozens of volunteers combed the woods. Experienced trackers looked for anything out of place. Disturbed soil, drag marks, even subtle depressions in the grass. Yet the trails remained eerily pristine, as though Daniel had never stepped foot there. Theories began to circulate. Had he gotten lost? Locals dismissed that quickly. Daniel knew those woods like the back of his hand. Had he been attacked? Deputies found no signs of a struggle, no predator activity, no evidence of foul play. And then there was Rex. The German Shepherd became a living riddle. Where had he gone when Daniel disappeared? Why had he abandoned his owner? Some whispered that the dog had been spooked, that he'd seen or sensed something he couldn't fight. Others believed Rex's return meant Daniel had deliberately let him go. Friends described Daniel as steady, not prone to sudden impulses. He had no known enemies, no debts, no marital trouble. On paper, he was an unlikely candidate for foul play or voluntary disappearance. But cases like this have a way of unraveling expectations. Search teams expanded their perimeter. Divers searched nearby creeks and ponds. Drones scanned from above. Weeks passed and the trail grew colder. One thing became clear. Daniel Whitaker had stepped into the woods with his dog, and only the dog had come back. He walked into the woods with his dog. Only the dog came back. The investigation and the vanishing trail. The disappearance of Daniel Whitaker was unlike anything the sheriff's office had faced in years. Hartsfield was a quiet community. Break-ins, occasional disputes, but nothing that made headlines. Suddenly, their small town was on the map, reporters showing up with cameras, eager to capture the eerie mystery of the man who vanished while hiking with his dog. The official investigation stretched into weeks. Searchers revisited the woods again and again, mapping every trail, every clearing, every creek bed. They widened the radius, hoping to stumble across a clue. But the deeper they looked, the stranger the case became. Deputies confirmed there were no signs of forced entry at Daniel's home, no suspicious activity on his bank account, and no phone records to suggest he'd planned a trip elsewhere. It was as if his life had paused mid-sentence. His story cut off the moment he walked into those trees. Family and friends clung to the hope that maybe he had simply gotten lost. Maybe he was injured somewhere, waiting to be found. But by the third week, survival experts admitted grimly that the odds were against him. Daniel had taken no pack, no food, no water. Even the hardiest survivalists would have struggled to last that long. And then came the twist. No tracks. None. Not from Daniel, not even from Rex. Search dogs that should have picked up his scent stopped abruptly in the middle of a trail, as though it had been cut off. Authorities described it as one of the most frustrating and baffling aspects of the case. Backhand index pointing right if you've been following this story and find yourself gripped by the same haunting question. What really happened in those woods? Make sure you subscribe. Every week, we unravel mysteries like this one. And sometimes, the tiniest overlooked detail can change everything. Theories begin to take shape. With no physical evidence, theories took on a life of their own. Some pointed to accidents. Perhaps Daniel slipped into a ravine or drowned in a pond that searchers had somehow missed. But Rex's return complicated that idea. If Daniel had been hurt or immobilized, why hadn't the dog stayed with him? Others leaned toward the possibility of abduction. Could someone have lured him deeper into the woods? Could he have stumbled across something he wasn't meant to see? A hidden camp? Illegal activity? A stranger lying in wait? Yet again, the absence of tracks suggested otherwise. There were no tire marks, no footprints, nothing disturbed. Then came the unsettling whispers of the paranormal. Locals spoke of the forest's darker history. Stories of people vanishing without explanation, of places where compasses spun wildly, of shadows that moved without wind. These weren't the kinds of stories law enforcement wanted circulating. But in the absence of answers, speculation ran wild. Real cases echo the mystery. What made Daniel's disappearance more chilling were its parallels to real-world vanishings. In the 1960s, a young boy disappeared in Great Smoky Mountains National Park while on a family camping trip. Despite one of the largest search efforts in park history, he was never found. His case remains unsolved to this day. In 2017, an experienced hiker named Chris Fowler went missing on the Pacific Crest Trail. Like Daniel, he was well prepared, and like Daniel, his trail seemed to vanish. His case is still open, his fate unknown. These parallels lent weight to the idea that certain disappearances defy explanation, that sometimes, despite modern technology, people can slip into thin air. The dog's role. Investigators circled back again and again to Rex. Dogs, after all, are loyal to the end. Why had Rex returned home? One theory was that Daniel, sensing danger, had released him on purpose, sending him back as a signal. Another, darker theory suggested that whatever happened to Daniel was so sudden, so absolute, that the dog was left with no choice but to flee. When experts studied Rex's condition, they noted the dog wasn't malnourished or injured. He seemed shaken, but otherwise unharmed. Had he been gone only a few hours before returning? Had he wandered alone through the woods before finding his way back? No one could say for certain. The last lead. Months passed. The search dwindled. The media attention faded. But the Whitaker family refused to give up. Flyers remained stapled to telephone poles. Social media pages were filled with Daniel's photo. His warm smile. His strong frame. The kind of man you wouldn't expect to vanish without a trace. 1 year after his disappearance, a hunter reported finding a single hiking boot deep in the forest. The boot matched Daniel's size and style, but without DNA or blood evidence, investigators couldn't confirm it was his. Worse, the boot was found miles from where Daniel had last been seen, in an area search teams had already combed. How had it gotten there? The discovery reopened old wounds but offered no closure. Some believed the boot was staged, planted by someone who wanted to muddy the investigation. Others thought it was the one remnant of a man swallowed by the woods. A case without an ending. Today, the disappearance of Daniel Whitaker remains unsolved. His family still holds vigils, refusing to let his name fade into the long list of missing persons. Rex, the loyal dog, is still alive, now older and grayer, but the day he came home alone remains etched in memory. What truly happened in those woods? Did Daniel stumble into an accident so well hidden it has never been uncovered? Did someone intercept him and leave no trace? Or is there something about those woods, something unexplainable, that resists answers? These are the kinds of stories that keep communities awake at night, the kinds of stories that remind us of how fragile our presence in the world can be. Backhand index pointing right, what do you think happened to Daniel Whitaker? Was this a tragic accident, a calculated disappearance, or something more sinister? Drop your theories in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe if you crave more haunting true crime mysteries where the line between fact and fiction is as thin as the trail that led him into the woods.